Thanks for joining me again as we dive back into another great classic film. This is a film that was unique at the time of its production and equally unique today. There really is no other film that compares. It stars a bad boy actor in the most sinister of bad boy roles, directed by a celebrated actor for whom this was his only feature film. It is a film that is part crime thriller, part film noir, and totally engrossing. It is The Night of the Hunter from 1955. Based on the 1953 novel of the same name by Davis Grubb, which was inspired by the true story of Harry Powers, who was hanged in 1932 for the murder of 2 widows and 3 children in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Grubb was initially considered to adapt the screenplay, but the studio wanted someone with screenwriting experience and hired James Agee. 5 weeks before shooting was scheduled to begin, Agee delivered a 293-page script which was way too long. Director Charles Laughton asked Agee to cut it in half, which he agreed after some resistance. Working with Laughton as a kind of script editor, the final script came in much tighter and on time. Laughton wanted the film to resemble the mental pictures author Davis Grubb had in mind while writing the book, asking him to draw scenes and caricatures of the people he created in his fiction. Grubb produced over 100 pen and ink drawings for the film. While preparing for filming, Laughton studied the original nitrate prints of silent films including The Birth of a Nation, Intolerance, and The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. He was also inspired by the harsh, angular look of German expressionist films of the 1920s. Laughton had been impressed by the sharpness of the nitrate prints that he had watched and asked director of photography Stanley Cortez to create that same sharpness for this film. The studio tried to convince him to shoot in colour, believing it would sell more tickets, but they refused. Cortez also brought back the Irish shot as a homage to silent films. The film's lyrical and expressionistic style borrows techniques from silent film and the drawings of Grubb, which sets it apart from other Hollywood films of the 40s and 50s. Laughton initially considered casting himself in the role of the preacher Harry Powell, but his producer Paul Gregory convinced him that no studio would finance such a film. Laughton didn't hold traditional auditions for any of the parts, he simply met with the actors to get a sense of whether they were right for the role. Laughton considered Gary Cooper for Powell, but Cooper feared it might damage his career. John Carradine and Laurence Olivier expressed interest, but Olivier was not free for 2 years. Robert Mitchum was eager for the part, and Laughton liked Mitchum due to his sexual persona. While there were concerns about the preacher being considered sexual, Laughton insisted that if you want to sell God, you have to be sexy. Laughton was an accomplished actor himself and thought Mitchum was one of the best actors in the world, describing him as a literate, gracious, kind man with wonderful manners who speaks beautifully when he wants to. Agnes Moorehead, Grace Kelly and Betty Grable were all considered for the role of Willa Harper, but Laughton chose Shelley Winters because she had a vulnerable quality and was a more serious actor than a movie star. Winters described it as the most thoughtful and reserved performance she ever gave. Laughton wanted his wife Elsa Lanchester for the role of Rachel Cooper, but she turned down the role, suggesting silent movie star Lillian Gish was a better choice. Laughton watched her silent film work and then cast her in the role. During principal photography, Laughton kept the editor and musical composer on set during filming, which was very unusual. The low budget meant on-location shooting was not an option, which didn't bother Laughton, who preferred sound stages to create the film's unique look. Laughton obsessed over every facet of the film, including getting the performances of every actor right. And rather than shooting traditional takes, Laughton would let the camera roll continuously until a reel ran out, which mimicked the way in which silent films were directed. Laughton's directing style was supportive and respectful of the actors' input, and several of them said it was amongst their favourite professional experiences. Robert Mitchum suggested that the shot of the preacher hanging upside down in his bunk, and Laughton liked the idea and used it. Producer Paul Gregory thought Mitchum was uncomfortably like the character he was playing, describing him as an evil son of a bitch with a lot of charm. Following its release in mid-1965, it was a total flop with both audiences and critics at its initial release. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times called the film a weird and intriguing endeavour, suggesting the film lost its way as it worked towards its conclusion. Jean Arneal of Variety said that the film begins rich in promise but loses sustained drive via too many offbeat touches and that have a misty effect. Harrison's Reports wrote that it was too art house for most people who would dislike the choppy editing, foggy melodrama and foggy characters. The Legion of Decency gave the film a B because it degraded marriage, and the Protestant Motion Picture Council rated it objectionable, saying that any religious person would be offended by it. The film was banned in Memphis, while in the UK it was rated adults only. While poor audience reviews are often cited as the reason why Charles Laughton never directed another feature, Laughton preferred directing in the theatre where he could constantly change any element to make it work better. He was frustrated that with this film, or with film in general, it could never be changed. Over the years, the film has been reassessed and is now an undisputed classic. Beginning as a cult film which regularly played at museums and revival houses, it received greater exposure through reruns on television and in the 1970s was re-examined by academics who wrote many articles about it. Roger Ebert has it on his great movies list, describing it as one of the most frightening of movies with one of the most unforgettable of villains, a film that holds up well after 4 decades. Cahiers du Cinema ranked Night of the Hunter as the second best film of all time, behind Citizen Kane, while the BFI's most recent greatest film list placed it at number 25. Empire magazine rated it as the 71st greatest movie of all time. It influenced directors such as Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Robert Altman and Martin Scorsese. Stephen King calls it the scariest film of all time. It is one of the 1001 movies you must see before you die. It was selected for preservation in the US National Film Registry. And the film has been influential. In Do the Right Thing, the character Radio Raheem wears brass knuckles saying love and hate on each hand, and gives a speech that is almost identical to Powell's. The Blues Brothers have their names tattooed on their knuckles, a comic reference to this film. The Coen Brothers have referenced The Night of the Hunter in several of their own films, including The Big Lebowski and True Grit. The film was remade in 1991 as a TV movie starring Richard Chamberlain. Chamberlain portrays the teacher as less psychotic and more of an evil, greedy man, and without the stylistic approach taken by Laughton. While a remake was reported by Universal Pictures, there has been no recent news, and my hope is that they don't bother. So lots of reasons to watch this particular film. Amazing performances by Winters, Gish, and especially Mitchum, who plays one of the most sinister characters of all time. A beautifully designed and shot film which takes you to another world, and an intriguing and compelling story that keeps you on the edge of your seat all the way to the end. It's a pity Laughton didn't direct more films. So, what I'd suggest you do is that you go to our website, find our virtual screenings page, find the link to this particular film, click on it and watch it. As always, see what you think. We'd love you to come back, share your thoughts about the film and your recommendations to other people as well. And then we're back in the not too distant future for our next classic films review. Catch you next time.